Revelations 12 reads like a fairly complex set of images that sort of superimpose themselves on top each other, drawing from different biblical stories in the Old Testament or even in the New Testament. And as with all prophecies, this one is a little bit tricky in terms of defining what each element of the image is doing and represents. But then once you do get enough of its pieces defined, it fairly quickly falls into place.
Revelation 12 highlights, and she being with child cry, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. The dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God, and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, and to her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her. So where the woman goes into this so-called wilderness, there's a they. It's a place with people. And when the woman gets there, a special place that God's prepared, he had set it aside in advance, right? You prepare, right? It's done in advance. It's been sitting there, a refuge for a long time. And there's going to be people there. And the woman goes there, and they feed her 1,260 days. 1,260 days divided by 360 is going to be 3.5 days. But it actually means 350 years. And there was war in heaven, etc. The great dragon was cast out, that old serpent. A great dragon is a serpent, a great serpent. And it's just superimposing here, you see, the serpent in the Garden of Eden has now become a dragon. Because when the serpent just started by saying a few lies, but then towards the end, it's a dragon because he's killing believers and killing Jews, right? Killing people who don't want to believe the way the serpent does. So that's what makes it turn into a dragon. And a great red dragon is even worse, right? Red denoting the blood that's on their hands. It picks up the story here. So the dragon, after some history, saw that he was cast unto the earth. And he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And the dragon is getting competition. People of the truth want to speak that truth and worship in truth. And this is what is so difficult for the dragon, because the dragon is built on lies. And it wants the population to continue in its lies, because it can control them with its lies. But if there's a population that's spreading truth, then that is not good for the coffers of the dragon. It's not good for their control over the people. This is why the dragon persecutes the woman. When the dragon is cast out of heaven, right, they've lost the edge. They're losing control of containing their lies. And that's what it means to be cast out of heaven. The game is up. Truth is starting to get out. And so their game is unraveling. They're losing control and power. Because of that, they decide, well, even though we are a religious organization, let's throw out some lies and justifications, which makes it righteous for us to persecute the woman. You just have to label them a heretic. You just have to label them a witch. You just have to paint them in a bad light, like Jews, and demean them. And then the rest of the population will say, oh, well, it's okay for you to persecute them because they're heretics. And this is what they would do. And so the woman, which brought forth the man-child. Okay, now this is very specific, because the man-child is Jesus. So it's not talking about Gentiles. It's just talking about Jews. The woman is a Jewish woman, because it was a Jewish woman that brought forth the Messiah, the man-child. The child was to be delivered, and the dragon stood before the woman, right? So this is the dragon Pharaoh, right? So this is superimposing different stories. So this is the Pharaoh dragon, which stood before the women, and when they were ready to be delivered, to kill the male children as soon as they were born. Okay, so this is what Pharaoh did. And we know Moses escaped this. In order to escape this, they had to put Moses into a little boat, and he needed to float down the water.
Exodus 1 and 2. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, and he said, When ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him. But the midwives feared God, but saved the men children alive. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived, and bare a son. And when she saw him, that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could not longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off, to wit what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. And her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child. And behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, This is one of the Hebrews' children. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, Go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, Take this child away, and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages. And the woman took the child, and nursed it. And the child grew, And she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, Because I drew him out of the water.
And then there's this other man-child, right, who was to rule all nations. And of course, that's Jesus. Because when he grew older and died on the cross, her child, not when he was a child, but when he was crucified, afterwards was caught up unto God and to his throne. Right? So it's talking about Moses, and it's talking about Jesus. And she flies into the wilderness to the place where God should feed her there. When the woman is escaping, mother of Jesus being personified here, okay, escaping, a Jewish woman, she's given 2 wings of a great eagle. The great eagle is the symbol of the United States of America. Now, other countries might have eagle signs as well. This is a place that was prepared in advance, a far-off place. And it's a place that would nourish the woman, and there would be people there prepared to nourish her. And we're talking about the Jews. So when the Jews were being persecuted, they would run from one place to another place. And it would be, eventually, they would get persecuted there, and they would have to go run to another place, and then run to another place, right? This is a place where they could go and be nourished and not have to keep running to other places. They could just stay there. Okay? And of all the places in the world where Jews could just stay, and not stay in ghettos, stay and become nourished, they could prosper in this place. And so the 2 great eagle wings are the wings of America, because America is the only place in the world, no other place quite like it, where Jews came to live and prospered for a very long time. The wings fly her into the wilderness, into her place. So now she's not just running into the wilderness, she's flying into the wilderness, into her place prepared for her, where she is nourished. Now here, it's a time and times and half a time. This is 3.5 times. Now further up, it was 3.5 days. And now it's 3.5 times. Okay? And so this is why we understand this to mean 350 years. The fact that it's being iterated here as going from days to times, right? It's a factor. It's the 3.5 days are now not 3.5 years, but 350 years. It's been factored. Time and times and half a time, right? Times is factoring. And these wings take the woman away from the face of the serpent, way out of the serpent's presence. There's no presence of the serpent where she is taken. But when this happens, the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood. It's as though they're persecuting the woman, and then the women, or some of them, right? Some of what represents the woman is fleeing. And their last-ditch effort is for the serpent to cast out of his mouth water as a flood, with the hope that this would carry her away and cause her to drown in that flood. But the earth helped the woman. And it's talking about the literal earth helped the woman. The earth opened up her mouth, right, and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And so the water didn't push the woman and drown her out. She was flying in the air, and the water didn't affect her, didn't hit her, didn't affect her. The dragon is a European papacy-based dragon. It's a red dragon. Okay, the papacy wears red robes, and so it's called the red dragon. Also, for all the blood that it spills. But the papacy literally wears red robes all over the place, and so that's an apt description. So this earth that opened up is the Atlantic Ocean. And the Jews flew there on the eagle's wings of America. They crossed the ocean and got away from the eyes of the dragon, got out of the presence of the dragon. And so the dragon was angry with the woman, and so he instead went to make war with the remnant of her seed. You know, the trickles and whoever was left that decided not to run, who decided to hang out in Europe and try to make a go of it. Make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Okay. Now, this remnant sounds a little bit more like the Jesus part of the woman, because the woman is not only Jews, but it's also Gentile believers as well, right? But this one was clearly the woman which brought forth the man-child. See, this is all, a woman here in Revelations 12, right? Depending, it can be the saints woman, the true believers in Jesus women, or the Jewish believers in God woman. Okay, both represent the woman, right, to God. The Gentiles are called the bride of Christ, right? They're a woman as well, right? The Jews were called God's virgin. All the tribulations, the bad things that happen to the earth, all literal. The earth opening up is literally the Atlantic Ocean, because that's what divides Europe and America. And we can prove this. The eagle's wings that bear up the woman and fly her across are the idea of fleeing. And the description of the wings, eagle's wings, is telling you where she's fleeing to. The prominent symbol of America became the eagle. And so until this has transpired in history, you wouldn't know how to interpret this revelation, because you wouldn't know who the eagle's wings were. So it's not that the nation of Israel is flying, because planes aren't invented yet. It just means they're moving quickly. They're hiding from the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, and they are wanting to flee quickly, because the Spanish Inquisition is a significant amount of effort to seek out who to persecute. Just like Pharaoh went beyond requiring the handmaids to kill the children and moved on to just the general population could kill male children that they saw. And so, as we've seen in the story of Moses, Moses floats on an ark just like the Jews, traveled across the ocean in boats. Moses gets nourished, just like the Jews. When they finally land at the right place successfully, they're nourished by America. And Moses ends up in a prosperous place, Pharaoh's home. And so the Jews will end up in America, a prosperous place. And so it's the Old Testament that you'll find is always the source for understanding the book of Revelation. This is just an article. And in this article, it's talking about America's oldest synagogue. Right? You can see this in Harvard Magazine, harvardmagazine.com. So there's history recorded somewhere, and they're reprinting it here. And they're just telling you a good, nice, feel-good story. And it's the story of the earliest Jews in America. Manhattan might have the longest-standing Jewish congregation in the country, but its Newport, Rhode Island, claims the oldest synagogue. Now, this oldest synagogue is dedicated in 1763. Truro Synagogue served a thriving colonial Sephardic Jewish community and stands today as a testament to principles of religious tolerance in America. Religious tolerance in America. You see, this is what they're escaping. There's no tolerance. The dragon has no tolerance for their religion. The historic building and adjacent Loeb Visitor Center are open year-round and attract visitors. During a recent tour, he said historians believe that around 1658, 15 Jewish families sailed from Barbados into Newport Harbor. Having heard that earlier Jewish settlers in New Amsterdam had been ill-treated, the new arrivals chose instead a colony of multiple faiths led by those who, like Rhode Island founder Roger Williams, insisted on the separation of church and state. That was revolutionary in its time. Keene reminded visitors. So it's revolutionary in its time, separation of church and state, because the papacy was the church and was the state. It's the whore sitting on top of the beast. And so they have the power of the beast, right? They have the religious power and the political power. There is no separation of church and state. But now they're living in a place where finally there is religious toleration, even so much as to separate church and state. And that was revolutionary for its time. So the families found life was good here. And it was so good that in 1677, the community had the money to purchase land, right? It was so good that they would really invest their money and they would buy land. You know, if they're going to get chased away from wherever you're living, you're not buying land because you can't bring the land with you. You're gonna lose the money. So you hesitate to spend money on land. But if a place is really feels like a long-term, peaceful place where you can thrive, then you buy the land. And so they do. And that land is now the oldest existing Jewish burial ground in the country of the United States of America. And so if you want to know, when does God decide to start the clock on the 350 years where the woman, a Jewish woman, gets to fly across an ocean and live somewhere away from the dragon in Europe, where it's going to be nourished? What would be the legal time that you start that clock? Because they could have gone to other places where they would continue to get ill-treated, like New Amsterdam. They had to get to a place where they were not going to be ill-treated, and when they could buy land, a legal ownership of the country, a piece of the country that was prepared for them to nourish them. Now, from our other studies, the ending year is 2027, and America continues to nourish the Jews to the end. The Jews are so embedded in American society, okay, with wealth and position and power, okay, and influence, that they couldn't be extricated if you tried. And so America nourishes the Jews to the end. And this 350 years is telling you what the end is. What you need to know is, when does it start? Suppose you don't know what the end is, and you don't know what the beginning is. All you have is 350 years. But if you're not sure of the end, and yet you have the beginning, you can just add 350 years to the beginning year. And so the beginning year is 1677. That's the year that the first Jewish settlers, now they're not the absolute first Jewish settlers. They're near the beginning, but still not the first. But they're what looks like the first that embed themselves into a state that now has separation of church and state as their legal charter. And because of that, they will buy land. And so when you take the 1677 plus 350 years, you get 2027, the year that Jesus returns. As we've always been saying, an amazing little piece of writing. It tells you that they're escaping the Inquisition. This is during the Inquisition this year. And the Inquisition would carry on for hundreds of years after this, right? The dragon can't reach this woman that crossed the ocean. And so it carries on attacking the remnant that are in Europe. So these people traveled to Barbados because they're coming from Spain. That's why they're in Barbados, because these Newport Jews were of Spanish and Portuguese origin. And they're fleeing the Spanish Inquisition. And so that's the story of the Jews that fled the dragon and found the land that God had prepared for them so that they could be nourished for 350 years, up until the year our Lord returns. In our next video, we're going to take a close look at Revelations chapter 12, verse 1, and see how it relates to the rest of the chapter 12. The reason why they're separate is that verse 1 says, there appeared a great wonder in heaven. Okay? And then it says, and there appeared another wonder in verse 3. So there's two different wonders, two different stories, but they fit together. They're related to each other. And so we need to understand each story separately. And this verse reads that there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. And there's the woman with the sun at her shoulders, clothed in the sun. And the moon is under her feet. There's the moon under her feet. And upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So there's 3 planets making that looks like 3 stars. And then there's 9 stars making the major formation of the constellation Leo. So 9 plus 3 is 12 stars that form a crown at her head. And of course, Jupiter is here in this constellation as well, which is what makes it a sign. If Jupiter was not there, which Jupiter represents Jesus, it wouldn't be a sign. All signs are full moon, new moon, and with Jupiter in them at that time in history. Now, this is not a full moon, and that's why this is a lying sign, because all signs have full moon or new moon. This is the crescent moon. This is the Islamic Russian moon, right? So this sign is a lying sign. And so we're going to discuss what it is and how it relates to the rest of the chapter.